Welcome to the solution video for the Azure DevOps Challenge. Let's go right to not Visual Studio, but instead we're going to go to Azure DevOps. So I'm logged into my Azure DevOps account here. So dev.azure.com/IamTimCorey is mine. And if you need to create one, you go to visualstudio.com. It's free to sign up for up to 5 people to work in it before you start paying. Okay, and you can actually add more than that if you have MSDN licenses or Visual Studio Enterprise, and there's a couple other cases. Now the first part of this is to create an Azure DevOps project for our ASP.NET Core project to work on. So we're going to call this the Azure DevOps Challenge. And this is the weekly challenge. We'll leave it at private. We'll leave it at Git and Agile. That's fine. And we'll go ahead and create this project. Once we do, we're going to go to repos, and we're going to initialize this repo with a Visual Studio gitignore file. So we'll initialize that. And now we're going to clone this down. So I'm going to copy this URL that it gives me. And then I'm going to open up a folder inside of my Windows or File Explorer. I'm going to open up Git Bash here. So that puts the right path on my Git Bash. And now I can say git clone and then paste in the URL that the Azure DevOps gave me. And that will clone down my repo, and now I have the Azure DevOps Challenge folder in this folder. And I copy this D demos because we're going to create a Visual Studio project. So let's go ahead, and you could do a clone or checkout code, but I prefer to do new project, and then I'm going to create a web application, and we're going to call this the DevOps Web. And then we'll call the location first, and then this solution name is kind of the important one. We're going to name it Azure DevOps Challenge. Okay, and what this is going to do, let's call this Azure DevOps Web or UI. There we go. So the reason this is important is because if this matches up exactly, it's going to create a folder name called Azure DevOps Challenge, which is already there, which means it's going to put the solution right here. Let's hit create. And it's going to ask us what type of project. Now I have the latest bits installed, so I have ASP.NET Core 3.1. I can't roll back to 3.0 in this menu, and that's okay because 3.1 is a minor version update. It's not going to cause a problem. If you do 3.0, you can follow the same exact pattern. I'm going to choose web application, no authentication, yes to HTTPS, no to Docker support, and I'll hit create. And that's going to create for me in this folder my solution. There we go. So now we have our solution. Before going any further though, I'm going to come over to my board and I'm going to add a new bug. I'm going to be very simple about this. We're going to say homepage not customized. And let's call that all we need to do. We're just saying the homepage is not customized. We're going to want it customized. Okay, so now we have a bug. And now you have to work items, and we'll see the bug ID 13 there. It's unassigned currently. Let's go ahead and assign it to myself. And there we go. So now we can come over to Visual Studio, and in here, the first thing we'll do is we'll commit these changes. So let's go to changes. We'll commit everything. Initial code commit. We'll commit everything, and we'll go ahead and push that up to Azure DevOps. All right, so now we have that working. We can come back over here and we see we don't have the ability to work on our bugs. So let's go and say connect, and we're going to connect to Azure DevOps Challenge. And now we have, oops, that's not quite what I wanted. So we go back here and we go to Manage Connections, Connect to a Project. So there's two parts to this, and this is what's a little confusing. So that was the local Git repository, and that's going to do Git stuff. But if I go to dev.azure.com for I am Tim Corey and choose Azure DevOps Challenge, and I hit connect, now I have more options. Okay, so you don't see all the options. Do your connection to your Azure DevOps through this menu where you say Manage Connections. Okay, so now if I go to the home, I have pull requests still. I can use sync, but I have tags, work items. Well, there's a work item right there. All right, so now if I make a change, let's go to the home page. So index, and we're going to say instead of welcome, this is the weekly challenge demo. Okay, and let's just say learn more about the challenges on YouTube at href equals youtube.com/I am Tim Corey. Let's say here and take away the at. Okay, something a little different just to have something changed. Now what we can do is we can, first of all, you can open this. We can open this up and it goes right to it. That's kind of cool. That's not what we're going to look for though. Instead, we're going to go to changes and we're going to commit these changes. We're also going to link these to a work item. So let's first stage this. And then we're going to, we can't add it here. It's saying, oh, we need the ID. And the ID is, this is not as intuitive as it should be. It's 13. So the ID is going to be 13. And I say, okay, that's the related work item. And now we can say, fixed the home page. Commit this staged. And then we're going to sync and push those changes up. The commit, okay? And you can see the bug from the commit. You can see the commit from the bug. All right, so that is the primary challenge. Now let's work through the bonus challenge, and that is to enable continuous integration and continuous deployment. These are two separate things, and we're going to treat them separately. If you create an automated build of this or automated creation of your pipeline, it'll probably do both in one. I'm not a huge fan of that. I would much rather see us do them separately because we're going to build every branch, but we're only going to deploy the master branch to Azure, and we're going to do it automatically. So let's create our build branch first. So I'm not going to use YAML. I'm not a big fan of YAML, especially not for demos, because it's just so finicky. I'd much rather use the classic editor, which is easier to use and it's very, very visual. I'm not quite sure why YAML is the preferred method here, except for the fact that it does allow for easy copying and modification. It's more, I wish we had the UI here, but that it just converted the YAML in the background. So that's just a private complaint of mine. Not private, but personal complaint. Okay, so we're going to do an ASP.NET web application. We're not going to do the Azure web app for ASP.NET because we're not going to test and deploy. We're just going to build. Okay? So again, we didn't choose YAML. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm going to change this to be Windows 2019 instead of VS 2017. That's a personal preference. So it's going to build the solution file. It's going to use NuGet. It's going to do NuGet restore. It's going to build the solution. We don't need a test. So what we can do is we can actually remove this. We're not going to worry about publishing our symbols, but we do need the artifact. So it's just a build, which is already set up for us. It's going to do the package a single file and all the rest. So it's going to package it all up into the drop file, and then we're going to publish that to this location. We're going to name it drop. Okay, so it's really, we don't have to change anything here besides getting rid of those couple tasks. We do want to go to triggers and make sure to check the enables continuous integration, but not for master branch. I want it to be for star, which means all branches. So this is continuous integration. It means it always builds whenever you commit code and push it to the Azure DevOps. All the rest we're going to leave alone, and we're going to hit save. Not save in queue, just save. Now we can come back to Visual Studio, and let's make one more small tweak. Let's go to the privacy page, and let's just say, let's create the world's best privacy page. We don't share your data. We don't sell your data. We don't remember your data longer than necessary. Period. That is our privacy policy. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to changes. I'm going to say updated privacy policy. I'm going to commit and push. Remember, I just turned on continuous integration, which means if I go to pipelines, it's going to kick off pretty soon. All right, it seems like it's not triggering for some Store just finished. And now we're moving on to building our solution. So we're almost there. So in theory, this should work. Let's do this. Let's move on to our environment and create, our release, and create a new release. And this release is only going to be for the master branch. Okay, so we're going to do a release to Azure App Service Deployment. That sounds good. And we're going to call this development stage. And in here we'll have one job, which we need an Azure subscription, which I have, but I have to authorize. So that just links your subscription to your account, which I just did. And then we're going to need to select an Azure App Service name for web app for Windows, for Linux, for containers, for functions. Okay, so let's go over to Azure, and we're going to create a web app. So web app, and we're going to create a free one, really basic. Let's and you do it once in a while, you're not really hitting it that hard, you'll have no problem staying under 60 minutes. And that's all free. So we're going to create and review that. And that's going to, let's go ahead and hit create. That'll take a minute to actually create and launch. And once this is done, it will tell us. But in the meantime, we can come back over here and let's set up the rest of our, this is the only task we have, I believe. So the pipeline itself, let's go and add an artifact. Say a build from CI build, the latest. Add that. So that's coming from our build that we're running, their only build pipeline. So we're going to come from our build pipeline, and we're going to say, let's enable continuous deployment. Okay? And say the filter is to only include from the master branch. So this is our continuous deployment. And remember, our bonus challenge says build every branch, which is what that star was for continuous integration, but then deploy only the master branch. That's what this is. So, and that's continuous integration. So that's that little circle right there, which means that, continuous deployment, which means that we will deploy every time there's a build of the master branch. And we'll do that automatically. Now here we're going to have to wire up our Azure App Service name, which that should be about done. All right, there we go. We can pin that to the dashboard. And we can close this out, and now we have the weekly challenge web app. Back over here, we can hit the refresh button. And we can, we can change, nope, that's fine, web app for Windows. And now we can see that we have the weekly challenge as one of our options. We select that, and then down here, everything's set up. We don't have a slot we're deploying to. It already knows which file to pull the zip file from. Everything is set up. We just hit save. Once that's done, let's call this development release. Let's save it again. And it is set up for our continuous deployment. So therefore, once this builds, it's going to trigger this release as long as it's the master branch. So let's go over here to our repos. We can actually make changes right in this file. So let's go to Edit, or anywhere in here. So, welcome to the weekly challenge for Azure DevOps. The preview, there we go. I'm going to hit commit. Updated readme.md is fine to the master branch. No linked work items. Okay, so you could have connected to bug, but we're not going to. We're going to hit commit. Now with that commit, it should trigger off, and it did, our build pipeline. Once that runs, which it should be about ready to run almost right away, it's queued right now. We don't get a lot of priority here because we're doing everything for free in the cheapest way possible. But once this runs, without doing anything, I'm not going to make any magic happen, without doing anything, it's going to then trigger the release process. So I'm going to pause the video for a while so you don't have to stare at this and wait for it to be done, and then we'll come back to see this actually running, or having had run, and see what happens for the deployment, which has not had a release yet. All right, so we have wrapped this up. We had a successful build, which triggered a release, and a successful release at that. So now you can come back over here to our weekly challenge app, and I'm going to click on the link that it generates for us. Not that link, this link. And if we did everything right, it should be we have an ASP.NET web application. We do. Weekly challenge demo. Learn more about the challenge on YouTube here. We click that and it goes to my YouTube channel. Cool. Privacy policy is our default privacy policy of don't share, don't remember, don't sell, forget it. Okay? So there we go. We enabled continuous integration, which is our pipeline here, and that builds on all branches. So even if I push to a different branch, it's going to build that branch. However, when we do a release, or when we push to master, is the only time we're going to do a release. And when we do a release, it's going to push to our Azure web app. Now, if you're thinking, I don't want to use Azure, which, by the way, that was all free, all the stuff we did, including the Azure web app. But if you say, I don't want to do Azure, I want to do a local machine, this release pipeline can do that. So you can come in here in the tasks, you can say plus. For example, FTP. You can do an FTP upload. You can also go to FTP uploader, SFTP uploader, and all the rest in the marketplace. If you would rather do a web deploy, if your firewall allows that, web deploy is here as well, IIS web deploy, as well as some others. So there's ways to even bring this stuff back on site for you. But now you have your continuous integration building on all branches, and you have your release just on the master branch going over to Azure, and it's launching this website. So that is the solution to the bonus challenge. We got the primary challenge when we created the Azure DevOps project. We created the bug report under work items, and then we connected that bug with a commit and pushed that up to our repository. And then for our bonus challenge, we enabled continuous integration and continuous deployment. Okay, so with that, that's all for this challenge. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.